Welcome to Superhero Rundown. I'm Crimson, and today we're talking about BBC's The Musketeers, a show that is wonderful and just heroic for all the wrong reasons. Before we get to the series itself, I want to just explain the reason I'm doing this. It's a historical fiction series, sure, but why this specifically? It's not based on any comics, and it's actually based on a book by Alexandre Dumas. Why would I cover this? It's fan fiction. It's actually fanfiction cubed. Oh my god, I'm gonna have to explain this. Well, let's define fanfiction first. In What is Fanfiction and Why Are People Saying Such Nice Things About It, author Bronwen Thomas tells us. The term fanfiction, sometimes abbreviated as fanfic, refers to stories produced by fans based on plot lines and characters from either a single source text or else a canon of works. These fan-created narratives often take the pre-existing story world in a new, sometimes bizarre direction. While the activities of fans may take many forms, writing stories deriving from one or more source texts has long been the most popular way of concretizing and disseminating their passion for a particular fictional universe. Yes, Alexandre Dumas was a fanfiction writer. He wrote 3 different fanfictions about real people. But that's not the cubed part. The BBC Musketeers is based on an English translation of the French text of the fan fiction that Dumas wrote based on a historical account of D'Artagnan, who was a real guy. D'Artagnan was based on a noble who served in the 17th century with a career in espionage. Athos is based on a Gascon called Armand d'Athos. Aramis is a fictionalized version of Henri, Seigneur d'Armet, who was an abbot, and Porthos was a first cousin of Athos called Isaac de Porthos. That's my first problem with this series. My second problem is that the 4 Musketeers are basically superheroes in the show and being unfaithful to the actual book. John Dugdale and Alexandre Dumas' swashbuckling Musketeers are only half the story explains that, in being consistently unfaithful to the novel, however, The Musketeers is at least faithful to the tradition of unfaithful Dumas adaptations. Even when they stick roughly to his plot, the dozens of movies and TV versions, from the silent era to Paul W.S. Anderson's 2011 film, usually do their best to mess it around with bizarre casting, Americanization, anachronistic dialogue, and so on. There are also musical, cowboy, ninja, and Foreign Legion versions, plus cartoons featuring dog and cat musketeers, Disney characters, and in an all-female tale, Barbie. Adapters arguably feel so free to play fast and loose because they view Dumas as a pulp writer, the king of pulp perhaps, near unique in having created not one but 2 enduring characters, D'Artagnan and the Avenging Count, but nevertheless essentially a purveyor of adventure yarns. I mean, there's some weird shit in this series that even I wasn't expecting from a Musketeer story, and yes, they are portrayed as heroes of France, but this takes it a step further and creates them as superheroes. One of them is always getting arrested for one reason or another. My guess is plot convenience or dramatic tension. The music swells when they're being heroic. Also, that fall should have broken his neck, but he's fine, everyone. Aramis is fine, so we're all good here. Like, how do you survive that? And before you say, but there was an awning, sure, but that was very serendipitously placed under him?
Sure, Jan.
The last problem with this series, everyone is fucking pretty. You can't tell me that all of these people were pretty back then. We have portraits! Seriously, every single one of them. Aramis is the hottest, Anne of Austria is the other hottest, and I get that this show would be unwatchable with not hot people. Oh, and before anyone asks me, Porthos is the hot punk boyfriend, Athos is the moody daddy, and D'Artagnan is the hot new boy toy. I said what I said. Have a nice day. I think the reason that everyone is so pretty is because we like pretty people as our historical figures. The Tudors, Vikings, Black Sails, the Crown, Reign, Turn, Victoria, Harlots, the Great, Boardwalk Empire, Chernobyl, Medici, gunpowder, timeless, there's so many more, so you get the point. Most of those historical figures are not beautiful by today's Hollywood standards, which you get in the Musketeers. Kaylee Hoy illustrates the reason in why period dramas are timelessly sexy. Although there is some conflict involved in the best period dramas, or else they would be insufferably boring, viewers tend to see a frilly, sugar-coated version of the era depicted. You know, like focusing on a dreamy, injured northerner enchanting some sexually frustrated schoolgirls, instead of on the endless horror of slavery or the ruthlessness of the Civil War pitting brother against brother. This helps the audience romanticize the time period, and it helps the box office make bank. Now, with all that being said, the first 2 seasons of this are great, and there are some amazing one-liners.
My name is D'Artagnan of Lupiac in Gascony. Prepare to fight, one of us dies here.
Now that's the way to make an entrance.
God, I love that in a woman.
What? Passion?
Violence.
If you'd told us what you were doing, we might have been able to plan this properly.
Yes, sorry.
No. Let's keep it suicidal.
That wasn't flirting, I don't know what is.
Rubbish. She can't stand him. One day we'll sit down and I'll explain women to you.
There are 2 really amazing standouts in the cast. The first of which is Peter Capaldi as Cardinal Richelieu. A worthy opponent of the Musketeers in Season 1, Capaldi commands every scene he is in. From the king to the peasant to Milady to the queen. It's a sight to behold just for him. Unfortunately, he dies between seasons because he became the 12th Doctor. The other standout is the casting for Porthos. What's interesting is that Stuart Jeffries examines this in his article, Why Did the BBC Cast a Mixed-Race Porthos in the Musketeers, by telling us, what's the problem? That in the new adaptation, Porthos, traditionally a fat white comedy turn, is a trim, sexy musketeer of color played by Howard Charles. But should Porthos be mixed race? In one sense, sure, why not? If a black actor such as David Harewood, say, can play the probably white English nobleman Sir Henry Hotspur in the National Theatre production of Shakespeare's King Henry IV, without critics whining about the historical accuracy, trickier, in fact, for a white actor to play Othello, since the color of the Moor's skin is inscribed deep in Shakespeare's verse, surely a mixed-race musketeer isn't a stretch. But that isn't the issue. Rather, the casting of Porthos works as an homage to the parentage and race of Alexandre Dumas' père, author of The Three Musketeers and The Count of Monte Cristo. Alexandre Père's father was Black Haitian, the son of an aristocratic French father and a freed slave. There's some other good stuff, too. The costuming, the sword fighting, the Queen's concern for Louis, the theme music that fucking slaps. I also love how this excuse for everyone in the second season is like, Richelieu said it. Sure, blame the guy who's dead now and had to become the Doctor. But there are some bad things as well. The third season is not that good from what I've read, and the cast, while good, can't carry everything when there isn't a credible villain like Richelieu or Rochefort. The racism in the third episode of the second season is also not good.
The Moor is an inferior species. He must be trained like an animal, with discipline and harshness.
It's actually disappointing. With BBC Musketeers, we see a lot of history as entertainment. Not in a bad way, even with the slavery that appears in the series. Jerome de Groot tells us what the good news is in the genre. Despite this, interesting results are thrown up as the show's unabashed liberal sense of identity is allowed to clash with an interpretation of the period as repressive. This is particularly seen in the engagement with slavery, something that makes it relatively unique to date. Porthos has been given a backstory that makes him a freed slave. The conflicts and complications that raises in terms of the Musketeers' goal, they fight against the business of misery and suffering, make for an unexpected perspective on the matter, as they are constantly reminded slavery is cruel and disgusting, but it is not a crime. The show is to be applauded for approaching slavery head-on. Most British period drama ignores or marginalizes the issues of empire and slavery, preferring to simply not acknowledge them. And I do love that I read in one review that it's basically Law & Order Baroque Victims Unit, which sent me into a fit of howling laughter because the show is definitely that. If you have Hulu, give it a watch. At least the first season. It's very well done, even if, at the end of the day, the 4 guys weren't actually superheroes.